Alright guys, so everything for the Lamborghini Silhouette has been prepped and is ready for some paint. Let us start with the body. We of course did all of the mold seams and rescribed all the panel lines. We also had to take care of a lot of sink marks. If you look right here, you're going to see this bar. There's one on each side of the body. I thought these was like maybe some kind of a bracing or something for the body, but it's not. These are the mount points for the door cards. The door cards are going to glue in just like that, and those little bars hold them in place. The problem is that anytime you mold something like that, it creates a huge sink mark, and there's one that actually runs top to bottom straight up the center of the door on both sides of the car. Now, initially I tried to fill these with some Tamiya polyester putty. I squeezed the putty out and it was kind of hard. I tried mixing it up anyhow, and I tried to apply it. It went on kind of crusty. I mean, it wasn't hard. It was just not, liquidy like you would expect from the polyester putty. It didn't lay down smooth. It didn't want to cure properly. And when I tried to sand it, it just balled up and rolled off and just peeled off. It didn't feather at all. I finally realized that my putty had gone bad, and when I did, I tried to remove it, and you could clearly see where it had etched the plastic, but it had not adhered to the sink at all. So it was terrible. I ended up going back and using the good old-fashioned Don Yost method of just using some CA glue and sanding the CA glue, and that has filled these sinks in really quite well. So I just put some at the top. I basically put some in a little bottle cap and used a toothpick and applied it and let it kind of puddle over that seam, made sure it was over all the seams, spread it with the toothpick, and ran it right down to this panel line. Cured that with some, Instaset. I then started working on the bottom half of the panel line, and I ran that right up to the edge of this panel line here. I Instasetted that, and then I did the bottom. And the reason why I did it in parts like that was I didn't want to mess up this body line. There's an actual ridge there, and I didn't want to run CA glue all the way across it and then have to deal with trying to get that line back without completely sanding it flat and getting rid of it and messing up the line. So doing it that way, doing it in sections, let me keep that line intact. And then doing it down here made it a lot easier to clean up this bottom of the door panel line. So we have both of those done. The body is keyed up. We have removed the molded in Lamborghini logo off the front. I'm going to end up using some 3D logos that I have. This entire undersection here was just like those doors, only it was just like huge craters. So we have filled and sanded that. That took 3 or 4 rounds of the super glue to get this filled, but we have that filled and sanded, and that looks nice and smooth now. So our body is ready for paint. I did go ahead and remove the sun visors. So my initial plan was to do some 3D printed sun visors and to maybe try to make them functional. I'm not going to do that. The reason being, this car did not come with sun visors. There were no sun visors on the actual Silhouette. And maybe we could say they added them. I don't know. But, yeah. The plan right now is not to do sun visors. We have the chassis, and we have done a lot of work to the chassis. First thing we've done to the chassis, we've filled in that battery compartment where that battery door is. That is now all one solid sheet, and I extend that sheet up so that it followed all the way up across these panels. This way it gets rid of the lettering for the on, off, reverse. It covers up all the holes for the battery section. We don't have a little tab sticking up. It's just one nice flat smooth sheet. We have also cut out and completely removed the kit's exhaust points. The kit basically had a rectangle here, just a plastic rectangle molded in, and then it had two circles, one on each side, and you're supposed to glue a tip to it, and the tips are really thick and not realistic at all. So we've removed all of that, smoothed that in, because I have 3D modeled an exhaust based off of the exhaust for the Lamborghini Rock-Up. And the reason I did that, the Silhouette has a 2-pipe exhaust, and I wanted the 4-pipe. Also drilled out some holes in here. My exhaust just kind of is going to disappear up into those holes, but this is also going to give me a gluing point to glue these into place. So when you look at this car from the rear end, instead of just seeing two thick tubes sticking out, there's going to be a 4-point exhaust. And that exhaust is going to look like an actual exhaust, because you can actually see the exhaust from the back end of the car. Also 3D designed some tips, and these are super thin. Handle with care, they're kind of fragile. But that gives you an idea of what we're going for with the exhaust, which I think that's going to look cool. The other major modification that we have done to this rear end. The kit uses female fitment wheels that hammer onto a big metal post that has a gear on it. This gear is supposed to be made up with a little electric motor, but it doesn't even come in the kit. It came in the old Guns version of the kit. It does not come in the Testors version. So that would sit down in here and it would connect up through here to that gear. Now, because they did it that way, they left room for the gear, so this side of the chassis comes out further than this side does. Now, that would be fine if I was going to use that axle or those tires, but I'm absolutely not. I have gone with some 3D printed jobbers, which I believe these are the same wheels that I used on the 240. They're a really nice set of wheels. I've thrown in some Brembo brakes, which will go like that. Those are going to go over these metal posts, which I did make these posts long. That was on purpose. Because this is going to go in like this. If I had not built it out and extended the side so that it came out, I think that's about 4 millimeters. This wheel would have sat way too far inside. It would have looked bad, especially with this wheel sticking out. As you can see this way, the tires fit pretty much perfect inside those wheel wells. But if I had done this, if I had not extended this out, this wheel would be sitting in about like that. So since I went ahead and added this whole thing in, I also went ahead and tried to somewhat replicate the little lower control arms. Now there is a bit of styrene tubing in there. So we've got this panel here, we've got this panel that covers over it, and inside where that hole is, there's a piece of styrene tube that goes all the way to the kit frame and connects that all together. I've also added a bit of styrene tube to the inside over here so that that will give me a more secure point to glue the other side's wheel into place on. Now the front suspension, I'm not going to try and rig that up right now, but the front suspension, because of where I want the wheels to sit and how I want them to look, if I put the front wheels all the way through, they would sit in, I mean, you'd be talking, they would be sitting in like that, and that's just, I mean, I think you agree that is just too far in and would not look right. I wanted these spaced out further to about like right here. So to do that, the post is long. The post is about where I want it to be. And I have added a small little bit of styrene to the inside. So what that's going to do is when I go to glue my wheels into place, that wheel's going to stop right on that sheet of styrene, and that's going to push our wheel out a little bit so that it will sit correctly inside the wheel well, and it'll look a lot nicer. All of the glass has been painted. I went with Mr. Hobby Super Metallic 2 Duraluminum. This is a really, really nice paint for doing like a bright silver. It's super bright like Tamiya's LP48 Sparkling Silver, but it doesn't have the, it's almost like a really bright candy base without all the flake. So we have the front turn signal markers, and we backed that with the, so basically we just masked and I sprayed the orange. The orange is actually sprayed on the inside, and then I sprayed the silver over it from the back so that you get that nice glassy look over those reflectors. And we have our tail lights and rear turn signals, which those came out quite well. These are actually painted over the front. So the red is on the front, the orange is on the front. Then I used some Vallejo Model Air to do these lines, because I could just lay it down and then wipe it off with a wet cotton bud, because these are Tamiya lacquers. The red and orange are Tamiya lacquers. And then that acrylic just lays over and washes clean off with some water and doesn't damage your lacquer for your red and orange. And again, we use the duraluminum on the back. I really like that this is sunk in that center bar. Made it a lot easier to paint. Also, the reverse light is sunk in as well. I just used some 3mm tape, cut it like 3mm by 1.5mm, and put that in there, and that just masked off those reflectors, or that just masked off the reverse lights really well. That all came out really clean. I'm really happy with how those came out. Moving to the interior. Ended up doing a lot more than I wanted to do with this interior. So if you remember, there were molded end seats, and I didn't like them, so I cut those out, and this was still all intact when I started. I was able to cut them out without breaking anything. I had the whole back wall was set up. I went ahead and added this sheet of plastic styrene. I think that's a 0.03 inch styrene sheet to replace the back wall, because my plan is I'm going to flock the parcel shelf and flock this back wall behind where the seats will go. And then I'm going to paint this. I'm thinking I'm going with brown with gray flocking and gray carpet, but doing the seats in like a beige, or maybe a mixture of beige and saddle tan to get a nice peanut butter color. I don't know, but that's where we're looking at. So I had all this done, and then I went and decided I wanted to start cutting in some holes for some 3D printed 6x9s. I was using a cutting bit on the Dremel, and the cutting bit snagged the part and ripped it out of my hands and then flung it. And it violently hit the desk, shattered into 5 pieces. I still haven't found one of them. So I searched and searched. I couldn't find all the pieces. I was going to try and glue the pieces together because, you know, I'm going to flock them so they won't really be that noticeable. But I can't find all the parts. I was having a minor anxiety attack. I freaked out. I was looking at, you know, spending $40 for another one of these kits, which honestly wouldn't be bad to do because, I mean, I wouldn't mind doing another one in the future later, but I have so many kits to do, I don't have time to do repeats. I finally stopped freaking out, took measurements, and remanufactured a piece of, I had to cut and trim to kind of even all this out where it was all broken. I had to glue the center console back into place, and then I was able to glue in a sheet of, this is 0.04 inch plastic sheet. And then I went ahead and once I had everything glued into place, I had a bead of CA glue on the front and a bead of CA glue on the back to give it a little more support. I then let that cure and I sanded it and rounded it over. So basically once this gets painted up, I don't think it's going to be that noticeable, especially since we're going to have seat belts coming over here. My plan, I still haven't done them yet, but my plan is to 3D model like some seat belt retainers, I guess you would call them, the little thing where the seat belts disappear into. And I'm going to glue those there and run the seat belts down, and then, you know, this will be flocked over. So I don't think it's going to be that noticeable that I had to remanufacture like most of the back wall and center console area. Speaking of those 6x9s, this is one of those. I think I got these from Miguel at Hobbyworks. I could be wrong. Those are going to look great in there. Let me turn this one around actually. So those are going to sit down in there, and once you've got flocking underneath there, those are going to look great. We have our seats, which are black box STL seats with the diamond pattern in the center. These are beautiful seats. There is a base, and with the base on, they're going to sit pretty much at a perfect height in my opinion. So there we go with that. I think those are going to look really cool in there. We have 3D printed up a steering wheel. I think this also comes from Black Box STL, but I like that a whole lot better than the kit steering wheel, which is this weird thing that sticks out really far. I get that that's the way the actual steering wheel on the car was, but I just like this one a lot better. Another thing I didn't care for, but I kind of felt that the kit's rear view mirror was a bit lacking. I mean, that's it. Probably pretty accurate, but I thought we could do better. So I modeled up and designed this, which has a little base on it. It's going to stick back just slightly. It is angled ever so slightly so that it will tilt towards the driver. So while this base will be nice and flat, the base is going to glue right up here, right behind where the window lines up. It's going to sit right in that little edge, and that base is going to sit nice and square and flush. and then there will be a slight twist that's going to angle this just a little bit towards the driver. A little bit more realism, and I really like that kind of rounded football-like shape a little bit. There's still some cleanup to be done. That is our rear view mirror, which I think is going to look a lot cooler. Alright, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. There's not a lot to this kit. We've added a lot with the 3D printing. I think the 3D printing is going to give us a much nicer finished product than just a stock build. I think it adds, what we've added with 3D printing is going to add a lot of really nice detail that isn't there. And it's going to flush this out quite a bit more, especially that exhaust on the rear end, and those new seats are going to look a lot nicer. Again, everything is ready for paint. We are going with the Splash Paints Alfa Romeo's Rosso Competizione. That looks stunning. I did my initial, my regular, the base coat, the base silver, and then my 3 coats of paint. And I was freaking out because it looked orangey. It looked really orange. And I went ahead and added 2 more coats, like nice wet coats of the red color coat, and it darkened up and turned into exactly the color I was wanting for this car. I think that's going to be a stunning color. So that's where we're going. So next video on this, everything will be painted up and we will be ready for assembly. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I appreciate you watching the videos, and I will catch you on the next one.